you kind of go along with a lot of the moves that, they're proposing because you think that this is, the traditional route. If they're uncomfortable about you taking it to, a third party eyes, then there might be something in that they're uncomfortable about you seeing. A handshake deal rarely works out. I haven't met someone yet that has had a handshake deal work out for the long run. You can't live on the fly and expect amazing results, right? That's like trying to play darts in the dark.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Seed Money. Today we have got a topic that I think we sometimes forget about, but is super important to remember because we get caught up in the crazy fundraising process. We need money, and sometimes we just say, okay, without thinking through all the consequences. So we're here with Devan Gonzalez. Entrepreneur, host of a great podcast called The Mindset Cafe. I was recently on his podcast, and he was telling me about this situation with an investor. I was like, oh my God, we got to talk about that. He's the CEO of Strive 11 International, founder and co-founder of Strive 11 Fitness, and lives nearby here in LA. Devan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no, this is fun. So we're going to talk. I want to get into all the cool stuff you've done, obviously, but you had mentioned that you did a handshake deal with an investor. And I think that, we talk a lot about on Seed Money about like deal structure and all this stuff. And sometimes it's easy to forget that a lot of these investor situations just happen like out of the blue. And it's really easy when you're in that position of needing money to just kind of go along with whatever the investor is saying, or, just like a lot of trust and maybe assumptions that you guys are on the same page is super easy to do in business in general, not even just an investor, like clients, everything. And that's why contracts are so helpful. And even this happens a lot with co-founders, right? Like, yeah, we're doing this together and don't even realize that, there's misalignments and there's assumptions on both sides, and it happens all the time. So I'm excited to talk about kind of your experience there, and hopefully there can be some valuable nuggets to help people, avoid some of the situations that you were in. But give us a little background on why you were looking for funding and kind of how that scenario came about.
Yeah, definitely. And before I even dive into that, like, I will preface it by saying I learned my lesson once, and this wasn't the first time. So I should have had some idea, but I think the important thing to think about, like with handshake deals, it's not just with investing. Like the first time was with a different business, and it was a handshake deal. I was helping launch that business, and then all of a sudden it got launched, and then people started stepping in. Investors wanted to step in, and then that's when I started getting pushed to the side because of that handshake deal, and that's one of the reasons I left. And so it can go in any given direction. So handshake deals in business, guys, like it's not the move, I promise you. But so my background was I was a personal trainer, and still I guess kind of am here and there, but for a decade and a half, so 15 years. And I wanted to take that next step, and I was going through different failed business partners and investors and so forth. Got to the point where I was going to do it on my own. I was like, no, I'll figure it out. I'll get a loan or something, and I'll just go that route. And then I got introduced to, more formally introduced to one of my clients through my business partner at the time. And we had a connection. We had some meetings about what Strive 11 was, and he wanted to invest. And he was a client, he was a friend, and still is. Though the crazy thing to me, I think that I got wrapped up in the moment, was that someone else believed in the idea that was in my head, right? And so him being more of a business savvy he's been down this road. He's invested before. You kind of go along with a lot of the moves that, they're proposing because you think that this is, the traditional route, makes sense. And so one of the things that had happened was he offered to do it with a handshake deal. And at the time, the wording was essentially that handshake deals were more valuable to him because there's trust built that's on it and all these things. And I was like, makes 100% sense. I'm a man of my word. I 100% agree with that. Let's do it. And so there was the handshake made. Essentially, he was going to invest a certain lump sum. And essentially, me and my business partner had to provide all of the sweat equity. And that was the initial investment, kind of criteria. Well, all of a sudden, we found a location, security deposit came, and I reached out and I was like, hey, we got to start paying for some stuff. When can I expect that check? And he said, well, just tell me how much it is, and then I'll write the check for that amount. And so it took me back a step, and I was like, hold on, let's think about how this is playing out. An investment is supposed to be the lump sum. At least that was my understanding, unless I misunderstood. This doesn't seem like that. So I waited for a little bit. I was like, okay, told him how much it was, got the check, paid the person. Next, we had to pay the contractors, same deal. And I was like, okay, I can kind of see where this is going. So anytime he's in control of the money, and that was almost, in my eyes, almost like a line of credit is how it was being treated. So I reached out and I was like, hey, just so we're on the same page, are you treating this as a line of credit? Because originally it was supposed to be an investment, which is, paid in lump sum. Like you're buying equity essentially from me and my business partner. And he's like, well, yeah, let's treat it like a line of credit. I was like, okay, I wasn't asking if you wanted to. I was asking if this is what we were doing. And he was like, yes, we're treating it like a line of credit. I was like, okay, no problem. And in my head, I was like, I wasn't upset because it's like, there's nothing I could do at this point. I've already signed contracts. I've already committed to the other people. So it's like, I have to kind of accept these terms now. But what I also knew was that if everything works out in my favor in terms of like the business growing, the business expanding, we were planning on franchising it, if everything went well. And so in doing so, I knew that there'd be a second business that was formed. And now I have the better hand essentially in this game of poker if we get to that stage. So the business grew, and within before the 2-year mark, we had a turning point where I was like, okay, are we going to franchise, open our second location? And we decided to launch the franchise so that I could focus on that. My business partner focused on the business. And so we had to have a sit down with my business partner and the investor and be like, look, we don't have an operational agreement in place. I can't launch the franchise in the FDD without an operational agreement in place. And so in the operational agreement, I had to basically let him know, like, before I have this written up, we need to have a conversation. You don't own the 10% that you've been getting paid out on. You actually have only paid half, and I gave him the exact dollar amount. And I was like, so you have a decision in this road right now. Do you want to pay the remaining balance in lump sum and we'll keep the train going? Or do you want to call it where it is and we'll prorate essentially your equity to what you paid, because that would be fair? And he was like, well, I can have the check to you by Monday. I was like, perfect, no problem. That was a conversation I had with my business partner ahead of time. Was like, if he decided to essentially not pay the rest, he was not going to get any equity in the franchise, right? And so I knew I had that card at hand. But how I did treat it, I let him know, I was like, look, I'm not mad at what you did, right? I know you played a gray area move. And he smiled and he was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of had to protect myself. I was like, I completely get it. And I understand why you did it. But at the same time, like, it would have been nice if we were on the same page. I would have still accepted terms on that same page, but you did it at a forced move. So now I've kind of put you in a forced position. I will give you still the 10% equity, but it is not true equity. It will be phantom equity. He owns 10% of equity of the gym, like hard equity, right? His name is on the paperwork. We sell the business, and I think he gets that percentage. If he wants to leave, I have to buy him out for that 10%. the phantom equity is tied to the franchise company that I originally promised him, right? So being a man of my word, I'll still give that to you if you met your terms. If he didn't meet his terms, I wasn't going to hold that end up, because like you're the one that broke the agreement. But now I need to protect myself and my business partner in the business, knowing that he wanted to play in the gray, right? So I was like, this is how it's going to work. Your phantom equity essentially is tied to your equity in the gym, meaning that if we sell the business or anything, you will be cashed out just like it's real equity. But if you decide to exit at any point earlier, you lose the phantom equity and you will only be cashed out on the gym, right? And so my business partner was nervous. He said, well, what if he says no? I was like, then he gets zero. Like, there is no move. Like, what is he going to say? Like, either you take it or you don't take it. It's free equity. And so he was like, okay. He's like, I agree. Like, that's fine. He's like, I like your move. And I was like, well, I wasn't trying to play a move, but you kind of forced my hand into having to think strategically on this. But long story short, that's kind of what had happened in a nutshell.
Wow. I think that, well, I'm glad it worked out the way it did. I think the part that we forget is how mentally exhausting that can be. It's already like mentally exhausting, just, coming up with terms, thinking through all the terms, finally getting the terms signed. How did that play into your stress level and kind of mindset a little bit during that process of just that uncertainty and, not having it all down on paper and not knowing where you guys were?
For me, honestly, I don't think it contributed to any stress. There's already so many things that are stressful when launching a new business that I've always had the mindset, if there's nothing I can do about it right now, then I just don't stress about it. I cross each bridge as it comes. And what he had done also to his benefit, like I've trained him for a while, so I knew he was going to be of his word. Like, he said he was going to do something. At the same time, I also kind of took a step back and really thought about it, because when it first happened, I was upset. But then I thought about it. I was like, he also has told me over the years of us doing personal training that he's been burned by people that he's invested in and so forth. So I was like, I can understand where he's coming from. So I wasn't upset. And I knew that if I held up to my end of the bargain, he would hold up to his. And so I think for me, it was one of those things where the first part was all verbal conversation. And then I kept everything in text. So he would call, and then, we would talk about something. And then I would be like, I just want to make sure that I understood what we talked about real quick. And then I would literally type it all out and send it to him. And then he'd be like, yeah, exactly. And then, so now I have at least a transcription of everything that was said and on paper. So if anything did arise, at least I have that at minimum. Right. And so I think that was one of the biggest things, is like, you can worry about it, you can stress about it, but if there's nothing you can do about it, then, crying about it isn't really going to solve the problem. You need to solve the problem.
Yep. God, that is, such good advice that I think we all forget once in a while, is in any way, shape, or form, recap conversations, put it in writing. Because even in conversations, like, you can think you're on the same page, and then it's like, oh, wait, no, we kind of like one person was tuning out for a second, who knows? So that is great advice. So real quick, so he basically ended up putting in the full lump sum once you got the operational agreement in place?
Correct. Yeah. So once we did the operational agreement, that took effect essentially once he paid the rest of the remaining balance, which it was on a Friday when we had the conversation, and then I had the check on Monday.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. And this is someone you've known for a while. So there was there was trust there. I think that's important to remember too, that investors have been burned also. It works both ways. And there can be reasons for them wanting to do things a certain way also. So again, I think mutual respect and, just conversations around that. When you got that operational agreement in place, did you at that point get an attorney? Did you not have an attorney previously? And what did that look like of getting that actual agreement in place?
So, I mean, we had different attorneys, and we have different attorneys for different things. Since it's a franchise, we have a trademark attorney and the franchise attorney and, legal attorneys. So, I mean, we did have help putting that together. One of the clauses that I know even with, because you mentioned like I've known him for a while and there was that trust built. And over the years, I've heard of stories, and I can even reference my uncle, getting burned by, some of his business partners. And money changes people, and it can change people. And that was one thing I didn't want to have happen on all three accounts of our agreement, right? So with my business partner, with the investor. So I wanted everyone to understand that in this agreement, I put a no buyout, a no force out clause, right? So no two partners could get together and force one person out, right? And that was a big thing for me because, the investor had the smallest equity, but at the same time, that small equity partnered with 45%. Now it's 55 versus 45, right? So it was a three-way street that everyone's on the same pace. You could be asked to be bought out, but you cannot be forced out. And that was at any level. So that was one thing that he did. He's like, I haven't seen this in an agreement before. I was like, honestly, I just want to make sure that we're all in the same, like we are a team, right? And it needs to be understood that we are on a team. We are either going to succeed together or we are going to fail together, right? But we're not forcing each other out so that one person or two people get to benefit more than another.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, I think thinking through those worst case scenarios, sometimes it's not to be negative. It's just to kind of understand what the situation is, right? What the options are, and to ultimately to find a win-win for everybody. It's not about, setting it up so that there's gotchas in there, on either side. It really is setting it up. So how can this be a win-win? If we all do our part, we all work hard, we put the money in when we're supposed to, what are the best chances for everybody to walk away from this, in a positive way? That's great advice, though, not being forced out, especially when you have a co-founder situation like that and one investor and it's an odd number. I think that can happen a lot with having a board, and an odd number obviously is good and you need that, but you got to make sure that you're not on the, side of that where you can all of a sudden be voted out, because that does happen a lot, unfortunately. What other advice would you have, for people who are in a situation where they've got an investor they've known for a long time, and it can sometimes be harder, and I think this happens with co-founders too, it can be harder to bring up the more businessy structure and conversation when you have known people for a long time, because you feel like you shouldn't have to go there, kind of thing. I don't know, any advice on how you might structure those conversations differently next time with someone that you've known for a long time and that trust is there, but you still need to have that conversation up front?
I think that the biggest advice is if you've known the person a long time, yes, it's probably going to be uncomfortable because you're talking about money. Talking about money with anyone that you've known for a long time can be uncomfortable. But at the same time, you have to know that the purpose behind the conversation is so that everyone stays close at the end of this. And so if you are structuring it as a win-win, which every deal has a win-win solution, it shouldn't be that uncomfortable. And if they're uncomfortable about it, then maybe that's not the partner or investor for you. Because yes, they're trying to make money, and yes, they have risk, but so do you. Right. And they have to realize that just because that they're investing money doesn't mean that you're not investing money to a degree. Because I had to drop my whole personal training roster, which I was making 6 figures. And I went from 6 figures to 0 figures. So it's like I didn't physically put any money in the bank account to start it, but I also just invested my 6-figure salary essentially to do this, right, full time. And so you have to realize that that conversation is uncomfortable and necessary. And if you don't have it, you're going to end up having that conversation, whether you like it or not, at some point once one person gets frustrated.
Yeah, I agree. It's the nature of entrepreneurship, being uncomfortable, right? You just got to suck it up and do it. Do you think, would you talk to your attorney ahead of time next time, get advisors for someone doing this for the first time? Any just tactical steps on how to think through having those conversations and those questions?
So, I would say definitely have a attorney, because especially if you're not the one preparing the documents, right? Definitely have an attorney look it over, right? And I will say, even with some of the franchise deals that we do, the real estate, contracts that we have, in Tampa, we just had a 40-page real estate contract. And I was like, dang, that's crazy, because ours out here in LA, it was 10 pages. I was like, honestly, hire an attorney, like make sure. Like I was like, a lot of these words, I'm looking up every other word to try to help you out. And I was like, I can't, like, go, hire the $1,000 attorney real quick. But it's better to be safe than sorry, right? And if they're uncomfortable about you taking it to, a third party eyes, then there might be something in that they're uncomfortable about you seeing, right? So the devil's in the details sometimes. And so if it's not an issue, then, let's just make sure I'll send you the document and you get it checked out, right? That should be a part of it on both sides. I just think that if I could strongly say it, is a handshake deal rarely works out. I haven't met someone yet that has had a handshake deal work out for the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I have not heard many of those either. I think another great way is just like you said, I think going back to kicking off that difficult conversation is just like, hey, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Like, it's so easy, we both want the best for this situation and the best outcome. And just to make sure, we're totally aligned, let's just write it all out, and get it on paper just so we can avoid any miscommunication and keep it, a great working relationship. I think you can really frame it in a positive way where it's like the entire intention is to make this more positive. It's not to write all these terms down because you're trying to screw them over or they're trying to screw you over. It's like, let's just make sure we're totally aligned and we get everything on paper and just avoid any possible, miscommunications. It'll make it much easier, in the long run, I think. So I think approaching it in a really friendly, upbeat way can be helpful to kind of break that ice. Especially this happens with people taking money from family members all the time. And it's like, it is hard to have that, tougher conversation. Anything else on that you want to mention on just kind of handshakes and, those more informal investor relationships?
I mean, I would say too, like the way to bring it up is like, you bring it up about what the investment is and so forth, but also it gives everyone a clear understanding of what their role is in this new opportunity. And that's the one big thing too, is like when it was the handshake deal, I had to be careful on my wording with the investor because I would hear him tell certain people that he was a partner in this and other people. And I was like, okay, like right now I'm not going to say anything. But at the same time, he also had no real say so in what we did, how we did it and so forth, because we were the only ones in the gym and he didn't know how to operate the business. And so he would also continue to tell me, when this goes to, the franchise side, like I'll step in more and help you out. And I was like, yeah, for sure. And once that operational agreement came out, it was, hey, you are a silent partner. You are a silent investor. You have 0 voting rights. And just to be clear, I don't need you stepping in when the franchise part comes out, because for you to step in and do work, I'm not going to pay you more equity. I'm not going to pay you more to do more. And also, you've never launched a franchise before. So why would you step in now just because you've launched a business before? So it was like, now everyone is on the same page. So rewinding that, if I would have had that conversation in the beginning, it would have kept everyone on the same page. Like, hey, this is your responsibility. These are my responsibilities. These are my business partners' responsibilities. Now everyone knows what they're responsible for. And if any area starts to lack, we know who to have the conversation with. Like, you're not holding your end of the bargain up. What's going on? How can we adjust this?
Yeah, that's super important. I've seen that happen where it's like with co-founders, one person's doing more or less, or than they assumed the other person was going to do, and the other person might have a different thought on it. So yeah, I think roles and responsibilities, super important to articulate that and have it down. And like you said, when things start going really well, all of a sudden someone's like, oh, I'm a partner. I'm the co-CEO, who knows what, right? So yeah, that's a really good point. Let's talk. So real quick, tell us about your business, franchise, growth, strategy. What's been your, experience there?
So the business Strive 11 Fitness essentially is a boot camp style model but we have no class times, right? So unlike the traditional, I sign up for a 5 a.m. class or a 6 a.m. class and I show up, work out, everyone leaves together. Our model is designed around my personal training experience with my clients of them being frustrated going to boot camps in between our sessions because the boot camps that they wanted to go to, the classes they want to go to were always overbooked or overfilled. And then also it didn't line up with their schedule ideally, right? So eliminating that and eliminating the X factor of why someone couldn't continue to work out is what the real birth of Strive 11 was, and giving people the availability to work out around their schedule versus around the gym schedule was just a huge thing for us. And then the other factor of, walking in late to a class, essentially, that fitness is one of those things where it's a sensitive and a uncomfortable topic for someone that's not physically fit, that hasn't worked out before. And so they're shy already when they're coming in. They don't want the spotlight to be on them. And when they walk in late to a class, it almost rewinds us back to like grade school when you walked in after the bell and everyone turns and looks at you and you almost can hear a pin drop and then you're bright red, right? So it's like people want that eliminated. So like now you're never late to a class. So anytime you walk in and you don't have to worry about, oh man, I'm walking in 15 minutes late. Is the trainer going to call me out in front of everyone? And I'm just going to go tomorrow. You know what? I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. I've done that where it's like you're on your way there and you're like, oh, I'm too late now. I may as well just turn around and go home. Because I'm like such your on time person. I always feel so bad being late. That's totally me. So you have a physical location. So people go in and they can basically start the workout independently whenever they want. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So we have basically 6-hour blocks. So, from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. We're closed from 11 to 3 just because that's typically the slower hours of the day. Even when I was personal training, like that's when, it's like a ghost town in the gym. And so to be operationally efficient, we're closed during that time. And so 5 a.m. to 11 a.m., you can come in at any point. Whenever you come in, you essentially are starting the workout of the day. And each day there's a different muscle split, right? So today is actually legs, glutes and quads. Tomorrow is, I believe, cardio and core. So every day there's a different muscle split. So you're hitting different exercises, different muscles. And so that you're also not getting used to the same workout over and over and over again. But then the 11 comes from, even though everyone thinks there's this metaphorical meaning behind why I chose 11, it's just because there's 11 stations. And we let our trainers kind of make up little different phrases to go with that. But there's 11 stations. All of them are on a singular timer. So everyone's rotating together. It's about 2 minutes per station, a little rest period in between. And then they rotate station to station. So it's literally just a constant flow of workouts for 6 hours. And so you hop in, you hop out, you can do a 30-minute workout, you can do a 75-minute workout, all up to you, all up your fitness level and your basically availability for the day.
That is great. I love that. Yeah, that's very cool. I love this too, just that, you feel like the fitness market is so saturated. Everything's been done. There's always opportunity and room to improve things. And I think sometimes those are the best businesses, right? Where it's like, let's just take something. What's a pain point? What's a problem? We don't have to invent the next, newest, greatest thing that's never been discovered, but take a pain point and solve that problem for those people, and you carve out your own, niche. So congrats there. I think that's very cool. And I can totally see that being beneficial to people. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in kind of the expanding and growth and franchise process?
I would say some of the obstacles and stuff is you don't know what you don't know. And that is one of the reasons why I hired a franchise advisor. And for me, anytime I hire a coach or an advisor, I don't care what resumes or what certifications or licenses or degrees you have. Have you done this before? Like, that's all I want to know. Right. So my advisor actually launched his own franchise, and it just so happened to be in the health and fitness space as well, which was cool. And I didn't realize that until afterwards, looking more into his business. But he grew to 400 locations, got acquired, and that whole nine. I was like, I value that. That's what I value is you have already done it. So I want to condense my timeline to success. And I think that was one of the biggest things is there's so much to do. There's so much information out there. You kind of get lost in what do I do next? Or should I do A or should I do B? And I would say with like the expanding part is people think that fitness is saturated, and it is, but there's always something, a different model that can be out there, a different, spin-off of things. But now think that getting into the market of franchising, where my competition isn't the next gym next door, my competition is someone that has 900 locations. And then why should I go with you when you have, 3 locations, right? So that's one of those uphill battles that I knew going into it, like that was going to be hard, but that's why I kind of wanted to do it. I always like that challenge. But that's, I think, one of the testing and trying and still trying to perfect like the lead flow, essentially, of, lead nurturing and lead acquiring and all of that, being a newer franchise.
Yeah, that makes sense. Very cool. Super smart. Yeah, getting an advisor who's been there, done that, taken the path that you want. I think that's great advice. Talk a little bit about your podcast, Mindset Cafe, because I think it's interesting. When I first saw your podcast, I think it totally makes sense that you're in fitness, because obviously mindset and fitness, mindset goes with everything. But I think there's so much to personal branding and entrepreneurship nowadays. As well as, you don't have to be pigeonholed in kind of one thing. I'm doing that a little bit right now. I just love the startup funding process. It doesn't really benefit necessarily my, other business, but I don't really care. It's a way for me to serve and help people and give back. And it kind of just fuels the soul. So that's why I'm doing that. So what made you start the podcast? You've been doing it for almost 3 years, right?
Yeah, it'll be 3 years in October.
Congrats. That's amazing. And, I think podcasting or any kind of putting yourself out there is so important. So I'd love to hear why you decided to start it, how it's gone, and just kind of what your recommendation is, the benefits you've gotten from it for other entrepreneurs to consider putting themselves out there and building a personal brand along with their business.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the podcast was actually started off, the name was the Strive Tribe. And the whole mission behind the original start of it was to add value to our current members. And I know we could have done a blog and it probably would have got better SEO ratings and so forth, but I can't recall the last time I sat down and read blog for blog. So I was like, well, I know I listen to podcasts and I benefit from podcasts. We could just do that. It's faster too. Save time. We're building this business. We sit down, record our voices for an hour and post it, right? And so originally it was the Strive Tribe. It was hard to get guests on and hard to kind of talk anything other than just the gym, because it was so, branded and it's so tailored and niched down. And then my business partner didn't really want to talk about, or even podcast that much. And he was like, look, I don't want to do that. And I was like, okay, fine. I'll take it over. And at that point, I transitioned to the Mindset Cafe because it tailored still to the fitness. We could talk about fitness with certain guests. I can, talk about mindset in general. And it kind of tied into the franchise and entrepreneurship and everything like that. But for me, all throughout my life, mindset has played such a huge role that I think that learning from other people's experiences can help you in so many different areas of life. Look, you're not alone. Someone else that is further along the journey than you had a similar start, right? You can take some of what they've done and tailor it to you and, continue to move forward. I will say for the entrepreneurs that are on the fence of starting a podcast, or, I've talked to so many people that oh yeah, I'm planning to start one. And then a year later, oh yeah, I'm planning to start that podcast. I'm like, I said that last year, it's realize that podcasting, yes, you get yourself out there. You have to be vulnerable a little bit, but at the same time, it is the easiest way to network, right? Me and you got connected, through my podcast. And it was it opens up doors for people that you want to talk to that necessarily wouldn't have talked to you otherwise. Instagram influencers, business, leaders. If you're giving them a platform and you have, even a small following, you give them the platform to talk, and now you get to ask any questions you want, right? This is your time that you get to talk to them. So if that's the only reason you start a podcast in the beginning, go for it. But then realize that your customers, your clients, they do follow. I just had on Saturday, one of my clients from the gym, one of the members, she asked me about one of the guests I was on, and I had no idea she even listened to it. Right. And I was like, that blew my mind. I was like, wow. Like, she was like, yeah, I listened to every episode. I was like, oh my God. I was like, thank you so much. That's so cool. Right. And so it's one of those things, you don't know who you're going to impact. You don't know how far you're going to impact them, but realize that if your goal is to impact anyone's life or change anyone's life, that's the easiest way to do it. And it has a ripple effect. They change someone else's life and so forth, all because they listened to something you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, like you said, making those connections. And I think for people, if you're raising money, it's like you can actually network way easier, by having guests on a podcast. And then also, it's really hard to get to know someone in a quick 45-minute meeting. But if someone can sit there and binge listen to like 7 or 8 or 9 episodes, like they're going to get to know you pretty well. It's a really powerful platform. And I'm with you. Like, I never liked, I'm not a good writer. I can do business writing, but not like anything really creative. I was never into like being all over, Instagram or anything like that, but I totally love podcasting. I think you get to talk on a deeper level, you get to cover more, and it just is more fun. So whatever that, platform is, I think for people that they identify with, but I think nowadays, and another reason I started the podcast was just like, if I'm going to be in business in any way, shape, or form, to not be putting yourself out there these days is crazy. Like, it's almost like a requirement is carving out the time to do that. And even if it's one podcast a month, like if that's all you can do, it's better than nothing. What would you say, how has it benefited kind of your current business growth and stuff like that? Have you, been able to kind of build strategic relationships that have, really benefited you guys as you've been growing? Or
Yeah, actually, I've connected with 4, maybe 5 other franchisors that are, and the CEOs of them, from dog training to mobile coffee to restoration. I even connected with the founder of Jackson Hewitt, the tax franchise, and Liberty Tax. He founded both. And so it was like, wow, like you just founded 2 brands in the same industry. Like, how did that go? Right. So those are some cool strategic connections because you can bounce ideas off of each other. But then even from podcasting, I've had people find episodes that either I recorded or I was a guest on, and you're a lot more likely to become a guest on someone's podcast if they've heard you talk before, right? And so people have actually applied for franchises just because they're like, yeah, I heard you on so-and-so's podcast. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that one, and it's like, you never know what the end goal is going to be. And so it's like those connections are all throughout, as well as, even for, I had a person on for first time home buyers, and I think that it already dropped, but me and him are talking, and we're actually going to be using his whole company and his team to get our house and everything like that. So it's like, there's so many different areas of life that you can benefit from, or this person knows that person. It's like, you just got to put yourself out there. In my opinion, if you're already doing social media and you're filming yourself, that was harder for me to start, and even now to still do, than to do a podcast, right? Because worst case scenario, you're shy, don't turn the camera on, just record your voice.
Totally,
right?
Yeah.
But for social media, like holding a camera in like selfie position and talking, and while you're watching yourself talk, like I was, there was probably like 30 bloopers before I would get the one message out. And it's like, it's less than a minute, And so if you're already doing that, you already done the hard part. Now just come on and talk about, a subject that you're already talking about every single day.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's way easier. Yeah, trying to nail like a 30-second clip to me is way harder than just getting on and having a conversation, for sure. Okay, given you've been talking to people about mindset for almost 3 years, what are the trends that you see, the mindset trends that you've seen successful people have, or anything around that? Like, what are some of the things that stand out as the most common, mindset shifts or way of looking at things that you've seen in people you've had on the show?
I will say one of the biggest eye openers for me that I'm a big analogy person. Like, I love analogies, and I love, little perspective changes. And one of the guests that I had on, it was in his book, and I asked him about it. It was called, white belt mentality, right? And this is something that after hearing it, I've seen this is how every successful person pretty much is in martial arts, right? There's white belt to black belt, right? And so you think that once you achieve black belt, you've done it all, you know it all. Well, in reality, black belt, there's first degree, second degree, third degree, right? So it's like, if you always have a white belt mentality and realize that there's always more to learn, you'll go further than the person that's just going to the destination, right? So if you value the journey versus, valuing just the destination, you'll continue to walk further. That's like the biggest like perspective change on it. The other thing is that realize that no journey is going to be a straight line, right? Usually it's like a hockey stick, right? You're going straight line, then all of a sudden it takes off. But then even that takeoff is not going to be a continuous takeoff. There's going to be bumps. There's going to be flat lines. There's going to be down times. But realize that everything is changeable and everything is adjustable. You can always go on the rebound on the way back up. You have to look at every obstacle or what people call failures as just lessons. This is one way that I learned that this didn't work, right? And you just try it again, and change up your strategy a little bit. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people get frustrated. They launch a business, they go ask for money, and they get turned down the first time. I said, well, that didn't work. How did I ask? Reflect on it. And that's the other thing with mindset is like, your subconscious only knows what you tell it, right? So if you're talking to yourself of, I can't do this, this isn't for me, your subconscious starts to really take that in. And now everything that you see, you're going to start to analyze that already in a negative mindset versus, well, that didn't work. How can I adjust this? That one wasn't for me, but it didn't work now, but it will work. It's just a matter of when. That's, I think, another big one for me is, not if, just when. And the last one I would say would be, you can't live on the fly and expect amazing results, right? That's like trying to play darts in the dark, right? How many times do you think you're going to hit the bullseye? You might hit it once or twice, but it's a lot easier to do it being able to see the board, right? So, or even, here's an analogy for you. If you were going from California, from Los Angeles, and you wanted to get to New York, do you think it would be easier or harder with a GPS, right? So that's the thing is like, you don't know every detour that's going to happen along the journey from here to New York, whatever your GPS is going to tell you along the way, but you make that detour and you keep going forward versus just trying to figure it out as you go. And you're going to make some loops, you're going to make some U-turns and all that kind of stuff. So realize that you have to be strategic, you have to plan it out, but you have to be adaptable in that plan. You write a business plan, I guarantee you, your business plan will not go according to the actual plan. It might start off in that way, but you need to be adjustable and adaptable because that's how life works. That's how business works.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I see that also with a lot of people who want to start a business. And I agree. I think it's important to do a business plan for yourself, just to think through the process and try to like poke holes in your own plan. Not that it's going to be an exact map, like you said. But you've got to get really comfortable with taking the next step, not knowing what the step after that might be. You know what I mean? And I think people do get hung up on, well, I don't know the exact plan. Like, even if you write it down, they're not sure, but you have to just have faith that you can figure it out and just take the next step and just not get overwhelmed by like the whole trip. You know what I mean? And just be like, I just got to get to the gas station and get some gas. Once I get gas, then I'll look at the GPS and figure out where, which highway to get on. But so I love that analogy. That's great. Because I think people do get overwhelmed by or intimidated or nervous, like not knowing how it's all going to work out. And I think the part you touched on there is just having that faith and that mindset and that self-talk that this is going to happen. I don't know how, but I know it can happen. It's possible, and I'm going to do it. And just stopping there. You know what I mean? Like having, it can be really challenging to just stop there, but just being really feeling strong in that statement and not letting, your brain and thoughts kind of run away after that, which is challenging and it's ups and downs for sure. But I think that's great advice. Amazing. So what are your goals these days with the podcast, with the business? Where are you going next?
I mean, the podcast, it's that I'm going to start doing a little bit more like solo episodes. I've been trying to be, on it, doing one a week. That has been a little bit tough, but that's my goal, starting actually this week is, doing one solo episode along with the guest episodes. But main focus is the business, within the next 5 to 7 years, hitting 100 locations, being at 3 this year. My goal for this year is 5. So the thing for me is like, I put already in my plan is at 5 and at 15, I'm putting stops in taking any new franchisees on, just to make sure that any gaps and any cracks are filled with the process, adjusted at scale, and then, kind of opening the floodgates versus just, kind of figuring it out on the fly like we were talking about. Because I think that if you try to build anything on a cracked foundation, whether it's business or a relationship, it's going to crumble at some point.
Yeah. I think, my current company is similar where it's like I basically approach it with a grow, stop, stabilize, grow, stop, stabilize. Because there's a lot of operations, a lot of like moving parts. And if you're not okay with stopping and kind of stabilizing, you can just end up with, a load of crap to deal with. After. So, and it takes discipline to do that. I think as entrepreneurs, it's like, we want to grow. It's fun. It's exciting, grow. And especially when you're out raising money, then the expectation is to grow. But having that discipline, which I didn't have in my first company. And I felt that for sure. And it hurt. It actually like caused a lot of issues that we couldn't get past. Trying to grow too fast is like a real thing, growing pains. So having the discipline to stop and stabilize and then kind of push forward saves your sanity and I think is a much more sustainable company. So that's exciting. Very cool. So are you going to do a solo episode and a guest episode, 2 episodes a week?
Well, right now I was doing 3, basically 2 guests and then 1 solo. The solo one was live.
Okay.
The issue was trying to maintain the live one, even though the members, some members love it and everything like that. It was being on that scheduled routine of having to be on camera at this time. It just didn't work out all the time. And that's where, some of the issues were coming along, but being, not doing lives all the time, just at least having a scheduled recording coming out. And if I'm able to do the live, then I'll do the live in place of that scheduled recording. So I'm going to have like some personal ones as backup just in case.
Got it. That's cool. Wow. That's impressive. Yeah. I've been doing 1 a week and it's like, it's doable. But I don't know if I could do more than 1 a week. It would definitely feel like a lot. So props to you for holding that up. That's amazing, but worth it. And it is fun. It's super fun to connect with people. So where can people learn more about what you're doing and, all that good stuff and connect with you?
So if you go to I kind of created just a website just as a landing hub for everything. But if you go to my website, just Devan, Devan Gonzalez, GONZALEZ.com, you can see everything about Strive, the Mindset Cafe, and all my socials and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely subscribe to his podcast, follow it. Good stuff. So many good interviews on there. And don't do a handshake deal. No matter what. Thank you for sharing that. I think, again, some of these things, another reason I started this podcast is there's so much content out there on like the bigger raises, and that's what gets all the publicity. But there's so many companies who need money to grow or to get to the next step or get off the ground. And there's a lot of investors who want to be a part of something like that and be a part of those businesses, and they have money to do that. And it doesn't have to be this like I'm raising, $10 million to leverage people out there who have money who want to be a part of businesses. So, and I think, again, you can, even in those situations where it's, with somebody, structuring it up front, having that conversation can save a lot of headaches and a lot of angst. So totally worth it. So thank you for sharing that. Because I think a lot of times these situations don't get talked about as much, and they're kind of the most important ones. So amazing. Anything else you want to share today?
No, I mean, I'll just leave like this one last like mindset kind of perspective for anyone that's starting a business. If you're on the fence of starting a business, or you've been waiting to start a business and you see someone else doing it already, right? That's your living testimonial. That's your living proof that it is a possibility. Just because you can't see it as your reality yet doesn't mean it can't be, right? So take the jump, take the leap, and just realize it's a matter of if. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Love that. Great advice. Amazing. Thank you, Devan. Wish you the best. And thanks again for sharing. Great to connect.
Thank you for having me.